All right, welcome everybody who's here, and welcome everybody who is watching us on live stream now, or for whenever it is that you're watching us on live stream. We're delighted that you are with us at our weekly Lunch and Learn. Let's begin with the bracha of learning. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we're going to start in the beginning. Once again, I'm choosing a text from IJS from Rabbi Aaron Leib Smokler. Her analysis we're going to look at, but we're also going to look at our own understanding of this passage from the Sfat Emet. But we're going to start with looking at a passage from the Torah. We are on the third week of the Torah. It's a shame these weeks go by so quickly because there's so much material in every parsha in Genesis that there's no way that we could do justice in a short period of time. But nevertheless, here we are. I am going to, 1 second, let me make sure that it is up. Okay. Share screen, Lunch and Learn, share. Uh-oh. Anything happening?
Just the black. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why it does that, and I don't know why I lose my camera whenever it does that, but okay. Let me open it up so I can see all of you. All right. So you can see the text, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. We are starting at the very beginning. The beginning of this, hold on, let me admit, Leora, with the very first verse of this parsha, chapter 12, verse 1, that begins, Vayomer Adonai el Avram, Lech lecha ma'artzecha umi moladetcha umi beit avicha el haaretz asher arecha. God said to Abraham, go forth from your native land, from your father's house to the land that I will show you. So, tell me before you read further into the Sfat Emet, what questions come up for you? What does the verse mean? What are the issues? Yes, George.
Yeah. Lech lecha. This isn't the thing I want to talk about. You think it'd be lech, but okay, lech lecha. Go to you. The lecha seems redundant. Go from, this land to that land. But it says go to you, to yourself, which is, unusual.
So what do you think that means?
It means possibly you're unique, you have a mission, you're not part of this thing that you're going to, it's for you. It's, I don't know. I mean, all kinds of stuff like that.
Okay, so George is pointing out a grammatical inconsistency. The verse could say, Vayomer Adonai el Avraham, Lech ma'artzecha.
Yeah.
God said to Abraham, Lech, go.
Mm-hmm.
Go to,
Yeah.
Leave your land and the house of your childhood and go to the place that I will show you. But it doesn't say that. It says, Lech lecha. And the lecha part of the verse implies an going inward.
Mm-hmm.
Go for yourself or go into yourself, so that there's both an external journey and, whoops, I think there's people in the waiting room. Admit. Okay, there we go. That there's an external journey and there is an internal journey as well. Great, thank you, George. Anybody else see anything in that verse? Leora?
Good morning, guys. It's pretty explanatory that if you say Lech Lecha me'artzecha, of course it's where you were born and where your father is. It's the whole thing is like too many words.
Beautiful. Okay, so not only does it seem superfluous to have the word lecha, lech is enough, but also why does it need to repeat, in a sense, or give, in a sense, three different descriptives where Abraham is leaving from? He's leaving from Artzecha, which means his land, Mi moladetcha, from the place that he was born, Mi beit avicha, from the house of his father. How are those three things similar or different? And Leora, the rabbis, in fact, ask that same question. And actually, they ask the same question that George asked. Both of those, the rabbis notice and find them to be peculiar and unnecessary. And therefore, they say, Leora, that there are different stages of leaving when we leave our home, and that he has to leave all of those different stages. Or there's ways of framing it that he's leaving not just his intimate family, but he's leaving the community, the nationality, the whole culture of who he is and where he comes from. And that's the emphasis. But excellent. Two really good points that have been made thus far. Anything else on this verse?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
The other thing I see is, now that we talked about the repetitions of me'artzecha u'moladetcha, the word lech lecha is go away. It's, it's not just lech lecha. It's like when you're telling something, go away from here, like take your whole being outside of here.
Okay, beautiful. So that the leaving that Abraham has to engage in is not just a casual leaving, but it's exactly as Marilyn said, it's a clean break from his past, from anything and everything that he was connected to. He must leave. Good. Jill, and then David, and then Ziggy.
So I came in a few minutes late, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating, but I'm wondering about also the emotional part of leaving, like the stages of leaving emotionally. Like, you leave, but first it's sort of like a fun journey, and then it's sort of like, oh my, I've really, made this change. And then it's like you're a different person already. And like there's all these, when you leave, like I think about when I left my family home and went off, to California from Chicago, there was lots of different parts emotionally of leaving. And so I wonder if some of these different words sort of represent that aspect.
Okay, so what you're saying, it's really good, because what you're saying is that the Torah doesn't tell us specifically what Abraham is feeling. The Torah is simply making a clear statement that says, hey, Abraham, God says to Abraham, get up and leave. What you're, intuiting is that any kind of journey is a journey that, as much as it's a physical journey, it's also a deeply emotional journey. And one wonders what that experience might have been for Abraham, because the Torah doesn't tell us. The Torah doesn't go into it, but one can certainly assume that there is emotional upheaval that Abraham is going to be processing as he leaves everything that he is familiar with and going into a place where there is nothing familiar. And there may be, which of course we discover later on in the Torah, bumps along the way. And how is he going to manage those particular bumps along the way? Great. Thank you, Jill. Who did I say? I think it was
Ziggy.
Marilyn. Thank you.
No, well, no, it was Ziggy was first.
Okay. Ziggy, David, Marilyn. I hope I didn't miss anybody. Go ahead, Ziggy.
So I think this might also be construed as another test. just like the Akedah with Yitzchak. This is another test of Abraham or Avram at this point, to see his belief in God and his belief system. If he's willing to do all this and sacrifice so much, again, of course, not as much as Yitzchak, but still, then again, it reinforces our story of who Abraham
Great.
of who Abraham is.
Excellent. So what you're raising is, I'm actually going to be talking about this on Shabbat morning to our bat mitzvah girl. Right, the whole question of emunah and bitachon. That's going to be my little speech to her this Shabbat. But how does one going on a journey hold on to one's emunah, external belief in God, and one's bitachon, internal compass of being able to have the security and trust in one's self and in life. Excellent, Ziggy. Really nice. David, such wisdom from this group of people all the time. David.
Oh, you haven't heard my comment yet.
Well, already there is wisdom in recognizing through humility that may or maybe not you have something to contribute.
Well, I think we're talking about the very first statement here, the verse 12:1, right? That's what
Yes.
we're talking about.
Yes.
So as an actor or reading a script, I would always ask, what was the moment before? What was happening? And was this like an alarm clock that just went off, and was he hallucinating? Was he lucid? Was he sleeping? Was it in a dream? How did this come across to him? And was it just pick up and go right now and leave everything? There were no instructions. I mean, that's also the land that I will show you. So he doesn't know where he's going. I mean, does he just, go east, west, north, south? I mean, how, there's my wisdom.
Great. No, indeed, you raised two really important issues. Number one is, where's the motivation for this? What's the backstory? Who's Abraham? Where's God? What's their relationship? Why Abraham? How did this happen? Did it happen in a dream? Did it happen in a verbal call? Did Abraham imagine this? Did he hear it? All of that, which the Torah does not address at all, which is hugely important to discuss and talk about. And the Midrash, by the way, has a field day on that very question that David just raised. But also, David, you say something else, not just calling our attention to the fact that this is abrupt and all of a sudden, but also going forward, there's no real direction. Go forth to a land that I'm going to show you. What's that all about? Give me some understanding of what my life is going to be like if you're asking me to make such a radical shift from who I am today. And God doesn't do that. There's enormous amount of what we were just, talking about before when Ziggy raised the issue about trust in self and faith in God to go forth when there is not very clear direction. Great. Wait.
Like east, west, north, south. I mean, he's got to start somewhere, start out some way. I mean, I guess instinctually he knew which way to go, like he was being led.
Yes, correct. That we're not clear. Very good. All right, Jennifer and then Lauren.
Oh, I'm so glad to be back. Thank you, Rabbi Cameron, and I'm loving everyone's comments. Sorry, I had to join late, just running some errands for my mom. And what I wondered is, going forth from your land, go forth from your native land. That reminds me of when, you fly to a different country and all the laws that you knew in your own land may not apply and won't apply to this new land. And then from your father's house are all of the personal memories and recollections that you now need to leave behind. I just wanted it's an extraordinary leave taking.
Good. So what you're saying is not only is there your own biography, your personal story, but then there is the national character of what you're so familiar with that also is leaving you in an unknown. So it's almost like he's wiping out what you're saying is the very slate of his identity.
Yes.
And trying to somehow formulate a brand new persona in a place that he is completely unfamiliar with. Excellent. Very good. Lauren, and then Marilyn, and then Leora, and then we're going to move to the Sfat Emet.
Do we know how old Abraham is when God tells him to do this? Is
Anybody
he 20,
want to
90?
answer?
I mean, because he's still living at home with his father. So I'm thinking maybe his father spoke to God and said, I need him out of the house.
How old is he, George?
75.
75 years old.
75,
Exactly.
he's still living at home with his father. Because I'm thinking, his daughter moved home last year, and I'm thinking, tell Carly she needs to move out. Yeah, I'm thinking from that point of view, maybe the father spoke to God and said, get it out.
Very, very good, Lauren. Excellent. Excellent. Marilyn, I think you were.
Basically, what I was going to say is what Ziggy said, but there's this gray area between when you're leaving and when you get there. How do you manage your expectations of what it's going to be like? And is it going to match? I mean, it requires trust in God that you're going to be led to the right place. I was thinking about the time when I think it was a Lauren or no, somebody else said about when they moved from Chicago, when she moved from Chicago. I know what it was like for me when I moved from Detroit. I had all these expectations of what life would be like in Los Angeles. And some of them were unrealistic. And so, you know, I was just thinking of that gray area.
Thank you. I think what I hear you saying, Marilyn, is that his journey is not simply an achievement of getting from A to B.
Right.
There are many, many stages of a journey. And at each stage of that journey, one has to take some time to process and reassess and determine whether or not we're moving in the ways in which we thought we were going to be moving and experiencing what we thought we would be experiencing. And there has to be constant evaluation and processing and reassessment, because a journey isn't just moving from here to there.
Right. It's like a conflict between trusting in God and, you know, going inwardly and dealing with your own issues about the journey.
Very good. Very good. Leora.
I want to say, coming from a different country, being here for almost 45 years, I understand the command, forget where you came from. Because as we grow older, for me, I seek and I long to go back to Beit Avicha, to the land I was born in. And it's very, very deep feelings that are emerging as, you know, I got older.
Nice. So in any journey, it's almost an impossibility to really let go of our past. There may always be some kind of longing or reflection backwards, even as we continue to live in the present and move forward. Rachel and George, and then really we're going to move on.
Thanks, Rabbi. Yeah, I hesitated to even touch my hand because I was like, you wanted to move forward. I think this is quick. All I was thinking here this whole time was, as I agree with you, all these really wise and insightful, interpretations, is that I was kind of wondering, and this is a broad thought, so I'm not even asking for necessarily a response to it, but I was like, I wonder what the frame of culture, even in this time, was that what this would mean for Abraham to hear, like the notion, and it really got prominent in my mind when Lauren shared too, just like this idea of, leaving, maybe, like dad's like, get out. But, I know she said it in jest, but seriously, like, yeah, what did it mean to have a native land? What did it mean to be in your father's house? I think of, like, from the parsha right before, it's very high level, right? Going through all the begats, if you will, or begets. And so now we're kind of like honing in on a specific fam. And so I'm like, yeah, what did this mean? That's all I had.
No, I think that's really wonderful. Not only is it important for us to read the Torah as a way of framing our own life, but it's equally helpful, right? There's something called a synchronic and diachronic reading of a text. And what you're inviting us to think about is, what's the context of Abraham's life in the moment? What was it like for people in those days to uproot themselves, to start over again? What were the risks involved? And what does that then tell us about the character Abraham is a way of filling out and framing a better understanding of who he is. That's really what you're inviting us to think about. Okay, and finally, George.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw this in. This is my real comment. But the midrash was that his father was not made idols, and he was going to make a complete break because he believed in monotheism. Now he's leaving, but what I heard, okay, I left Chicago, I left Israel, I left this, I left Iowa. My grandparents left Lithuania and Ukraine, but there's a common thread, you know what I mean, of values in Judaism. We didn't break off. We just sort of continued in a different location. This is different. Stop being like them. Lech lecha,
So would, George, then would what you're saying apply to somebody who converts to Judaism?
Yeah.
In other words, a Jew by choice would be more reflective of the kind of journey that Abraham is taking.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Right. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, David.
Okay, since this is Genesis 12, a little going back, I mean, God has appeared to Adam and Eve, but how many times has God appeared to anybody else between Genesis 1 and Genesis 12?
Yeah, God spoke to Cain. He had that interaction with Cain. He had the interaction with Noah. So it's really, Adam and Eve, Cain, Noah, Cain, Noah, and then he interacts with the people of the Tower of Babel, but there it's not a dialogue where God is engaging them. It's God is behaving towards these people. And then finally, this, conversation or dialogue that we don't see the dialogue part of it, but some kind of conversation or dialogue with Abraham. Okay, let's now jump in and take a look at the Sfat Emet. God said to Abraham, "Go forth from your land." Rabbi Yitzchak opened, "Listen, daughter, look and incline your ear and forget your people and your father's house." So let's not go any further. Let's stop there. So we have the Sfat Emet who takes the verse from the Torah that we're looking at, and then what he does is he brings in a verse from the book of Tehillim, from the book of Psalms, that somehow is going to unlock for us the meaning of this verse. Go forth from your native land, from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. So what we need to be asking ourselves is, how does this verse from Tehillim, Psalm 45, help us better understand the nature of what Abraham is hearing and engaging in when God commands him to go forth? So now let's take a look at Psalm 45. Listen, daughter, look and incline your ear and forget your people and your father's house. Just from a simple reading, what is that psalm, that line from Psalms telling us? Marilyn?
Well, they talked about daughter. I mean, women were totally dependent, probably totally dependent on men in those days. So if she's being commanded to leave, I mean, she's leaving all the comfort and everything that, you know, she had and going towards, well, I would say another father, which is God.
Good. Okay. Excellent. Jennifer?
Hey, you know, it reminds me of, you know, these international in the 17th, 16th, 17th, you know, all those centuries, when you would have cross marriage to unite alliances between countries. And the mother would say, I just saw this on, you know, television. The mother would say, look, forget everything you knew, adapt yourself thoroughly. This just reminds me of what mothers then would tell their children, their young daughters. Forget us and adapt thoroughly and make yourself acceptable to that new family.
Interesting. Interesting. Very, thank you. Okay. George?
Yeah, I'm looking at the art scroll as a comment. Repudiate false religions and sincerely embrace the Torah. So that would be similar in meaning to with Abraham, you know, forget all this false stuff and, you know, come into the Torah.
Okay, good. So here, so in this interpretation, similar to what Jennifer said, it's really what George was saying earlier, which is applicable maybe to a Jew by choice.
Yeah.
Let go of the belief system that you are familiar with and accept the belief system that you are entering into. The moment is you are no longer a polytheist, but now you are a monotheist. That you are going to be entering into a new covenant, a covenant with me being God. And that's how this verse helps us to frame what's happening in the moment when God says to Abraham, go forth. Great. Thank you, George. Rachel. And then I think I see Ruth Ann's hand up there. Okay, so Rachel and then Ruth Ann.
Sure, thanks. I just got chills. I mean, I appreciate what you just shared earlier, Jennifer, and also what you just said, Rabbi, you know, as we're tying in the Jew by choice. So for those watching, listening, participating, I'm, you know, maybe could say a token one in the group. Oh, no, I'm not the only one, I think. I'm not sure. But anyways, most recent, I'll say that. And it gave me chills because I'm like, yeah, that is true. I mean, that is what I did. And I guess it particularly felt, you know, poignant because daughter. So, you know, I was like, yeah, I you know, said no, or I rejected, left behind how I used to think and what I followed, practiced to now follow in a new way. And I think of when I was even specifically asked as part of, you know, my baked in the questions of kind of the things that I say I now affirm, the affirmations. And so I just, yeah, this is really poignant.
Well, so now not only will you resonate with the book of Ruth and Ruth's comments to Naomi, but you now have Psalm 45, verse 11, to add to your, you know, those passages in our Torah that resonate with your life's journey. Oh, Ruth Ann, yes. Ruth Ann, make sure you unmute yourself so we can hear your wisdom.
Okay. When it's addressed to daughters, the females, it's also saying, Father, follow your husband on a simplistic level, you know, just, I don't know if that.
Good. It very well could be that, especially in ancient times when a young girl would leave her family's house to join her husband's, the tradition was that now you are part of their family and have to abide by their customs, their traditions, and whatnot. Great. Thank you, Ruth Ann. Another pivot to the culture and the context of what it is that we're reading. So Rabbi Smokler offers this interpretation of why he adds this verse. And then when we're done with this, then we're going to go back up to read the rest of the Sfat Emet. She says, one would expect that inclining one's ear or turning one's attention to something would happen before hearing, not after. So if you look back at the verse, what does it say? It says, take heed, right? Hear, daughter, and note, incline your ear. What she's saying is the verse has it backwards. It should state first, incline your ear, daughter, take heed, forget your people in your father's house. That's the more logical way to do it. Listen and then understand, as opposed to this position, which is understand and then listen. Very similar, by the way, to what other phrase later on in Exodus?
Oh, see and do and yeah.
Yes, na'aseh v'nishma.
Yeah.
Right? Do and then listen and then understand. So there's a reverse here. That's what Rabbi Smokler is pointing out in this verse. What could it mean, she asks, to first hear and only then to actively listen? What should Abraham and we make of God's directing him not to a specific place, but to a land that he will be shown in 3 days' time? Why such obfuscation? Keep going. Insofar as we take the Abrahamic journey as a paradigm for our own spiritual journeys, the Sfat Emet proposes that the ambiguity of God's call is essential to the nature of that call. In other words, the fact that it says, take heed and then incline your ear means, right, you're going to have to listen carefully along this journey, along this path. That what you are getting right now is very little information that you will have to be able to determine the nature of the path. And you will need to stay in dialogue with God. Right? That in essence is what Rabbi Smokler is suggesting in her understanding of what the Sfat Emet is doing here. Excuse me, Marilyn, yes.
Wait a minute.
Isn't it sort of like acting as if, I mean, when you have something that you want to do or change or whatever, you may not be there emotionally or first, but if you start acting as if you were there, you get in a place where you can absorb where you're supposed to be.
100%, right? Absolutely. We we'll often say it to our kids when they go into a new school or, go off to college. Act in a certain way. I know you're not happy, you're feeling disconnected, but live in that moment and be present, and who knows what might come of that if you give yourself the chance to experience whatever it is fully that you are experiencing in this moment. Yeah. Let's now finish the rest of the Sfat Emet, and then we'll go back to more of the analysis. He continues with another quote by Rabbi Yitzchak. This may be compared to a man who was traveling from place to place when he saw a castle aglow. The Hebrew word is bira doleket, a palace burning, so to speak, or glowing. He, meaning Abraham, said, is it possible that this castle lacks a person to look after it? Right? If there is a burning building and it's just burning up, one would ask the question, well, wait a minute. Where is the individual, the owner of that building, to put out the fire? The owner of the building looked at him and said to him, here the owner of the building is most likely in this midrash, God, and the palace that's burning is maybe the world around Abraham. God says, I am the master of the castle. What happened with Abraham, our ancestor, was similar. He said, is it possible that this universe lacks a person to look after it? The Holy Blessed One looked at him and said, I am master of the universe. So this very famous midrash is supposed to help us understand the nature of Abraham's journey. So before we get into the additional interpretation that Rabbi Smokler offers, would any of you like to suggest, how does this midrash help us understand the nature of Abraham or our own personal journeys? Ziggy, and then Marilyn and David. Ziggy, you're muted. You're muted, Ziggy.
I'm not sure that I'm answering your question, but what I find here is a dichotomy, because at the beginning, we're looking at this pasuk, and we're saying it shows a lot of faith on Abraham's part to just drop everything and go. At the end, he's questioning, and it almost sounds like he does not know that God is the master of the universe. It's kind of like it's incongruous. The two thoughts are incongruous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Marilyn?
The castle aglow, does that mean it? I think it could have two meanings. One actually burning, and the other one could be illuminated. And if it's illuminated, that could be God's presence.
Yeah, I think doleket means like it is being consumed.
Oh, okay.
That's the nature of that term.
I was going by the English, so
yeah, I know the English, unfortunately, is an interpretation of doleket, which is to consume or burn to ash.
Okay.
If my Hebrew is accurate. David, and then Jennifer, and then Judy, and then Jill. Wow, there's a lot of J's here. David, Jennifer, Judy, Jill.
And Jews.
And Jews.
And
that's
Jews.
right.
So my thought is, it's probably a little out there as usual, but I'm thinking that Genesis 12:1 wasn't written while it was happening. So I don't know if Abram or Abraham knew about Genesis 1, where God created man in his own image. So when I keep hearing Father's house, I keep thinking that if God made us in his image, that Abram or Abram is an extension of him going out into the world, as he promised that they would, have, generations more than the sand and the sea. And I don't know if he understood that he was made in God's image at that time, if that makes any sense, because I don't think, like I said, the Bible was written at the time it was happening. I'm not sure the 5 books of Moses had been already established yet.
Yeah, it's so interesting, David. What you're saying is that for us, reading the story in its complete form gives us greater insight than the characters who were involved in the action in the moment, and what is their experience and understanding of their past, their present, their future, and the relationship to God and all of humanity. Very nice. Okay, was it Jill, Judy, and no, it was Jennifer. Jennifer, Judy, Jill. So go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, hey, just a quick point about the comparing of the castle to the world that now Avram is going to enter. This use of the word master, the master of the universe, as compared to looking after it. When you look at someone who looks after something, I was just curious about the word.
Yeah.
You wouldn't really call that person a master.
Very good.
But anyway.
So in fact, Jennifer, the way in which this midrash is treated in our tradition is that God is basically saying to Abraham, or Abraham is recognizing that that there is a partnership between God and humanity, that the palace is burning and God may be the master of the world, but that God expects humanity to be the firefighters, the ones to put out the fire. And that
So in other words,
yes, and that's the relationship that is implied in this midrash.
oh, I see that God is the master of the universe, but he needs a caretaker to honor. Okay, got it.
Exactly.
Thanks so much.
Exactly. Judy and then Jill.
Well, I'm still stuck on understanding the part about forgetting your people, your father's house, and forgetting who you were before, because, in other words, wiping the slate clean. I mean, so much of who we are is who we were and what we learned from it. And so I'm not sure exactly what they're saying here.
No, so I think what you're pointing out is that any journey forward cannot really ever be an abrupt ignoring of our past, that we carry with us, whether it's in our DNA, in our genes, right, in our mind, in our emotional makeup, and certainly in our cultural connections and physical connections to those who came before us. We're going to carry that forward, whether God tells us to make a break from it or not. Right? Let's go back to the idea that George raised earlier, a Jew by choice. Even a Jew by choice that may leave his or her faith doesn't mean that that faith that they grew up in may not in some way frame for them the new faith that they're embracing. It may not be that they're holding on to the belief system, but it would be very difficult to just ignore everything about that when they, read a text, engage with a person, experience a holiday, right? Because that past comes with us. And I think, Judy, that's what you're saying. And we're going to see that actually as we go further along in Rabbi Smokler's messages, that what's the nature of the journeys that we go on spiritually. Great. Jill. I caught you in a bite. I'm sorry.
You did, excuse me. I didn't want to learn, but
I tried to time it so that you were finished chewing.
I'm almost there.
And by the way, I just want to encourage all of you, right, because this is at lunchtime, so feel free to bring your lunch and enjoy your meal so that you're both physically and spiritually feeding yourself.
Thank you, Rabbi. I think what I wanted to say about this was that I think that this midrash might be talking also about God being the master, but even though God is the master of the universe, that doesn't mean that things don't go awry, that they're still burning. And, he or she or it, whatever, I don't know how to refer to the divine, but that the divine doesn't necessarily change the day-to-day happenings in the world, and that it's up to each one of us to be a part of that as somebody else said, the caretaker of the fire, as well as, but that God doesn't put out the fire. There's still badness, there's still evil, there's still difficulties in the world, even though he, she, it might be the master.
Very good. In other words, God has given humanity free will, and with that free will, the ability to, and we also learn in the beginning of the story, God has given us dominion over all of the world, and the dominion means to be responsible, to care for the world in which we live. Great. Jennifer.
I just was thinking, thanks, I'm learning from all of you of this careful reading. Why was it necessary in Rabbi Yitzhak's tale for the man to have been traveling from place to place, meaning, rather than he just was traveling and saw a castle, that maybe these other places didn't have it because they were idolatrous. And Abraham, I put in the chat, you know, Abraham's whole culture that he came from was so riddled with idolatry that it may have been that he needed to abandon that entire self because
Nice.
he wouldn't have even known, how.
Very, very nice. Beautiful. Yes, such good insights from all of you. So let's take a look at further trying to understand. She goes on, Rabbi Smokman brings another text from Sfat Emet, where he says, "This is the issue. It is more pleasant to the Holy One that the people of Israel have the will and desire to draw near and apprehend God's Torah than it is for them to know the divine, because it is the human will that enables one to draw near and to apprehend. It is certain that this longing is more important before the Blessed One." So the Sfat Emet is making a very interesting point here. What he's saying here is that for God, the journey is more important than the arrival, right? Because the arrival doesn't really exist. Can we ever really know God? Every moment of our life is another moment to learn about and to try to fathom and grapple with and understand God and the world around us. There is no ultimate knowing. All there is the journey. Right? Abraham, when God says to Abraham, so in other words, what the Sfat Emet is really focusing on here is not the Lech Lecha part, right? But this part. El Eretz Asher Areka, to the land that I will show you. In other words, somebody said this earlier, it's a little unfair of God not to tell Abraham exactly where Abraham is going, and instead to ask Abraham to have faith that wherever it is that he's going to be going, right, that's the place to go. Because Abraham doesn't know where it is that he's going. And that's the point of the Sfat Emet, that the journey of life is a journey to the unknown, and to a certain extent, the unknowable. That there's not absolute clarity in where we're going and in whether or not we're going to understand when we get there, right, what we need to have learned. That, I believe, is what the Sfat Emet is talking about. George, you want to say something?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the text. I'm not,
Okay.
no comment.
So she now analyzes the Sfat Emet. God wants us to want.
Yeah.
The Holy One wants us to search, to explore, to pursue holiness, but not to attain it or know it.
Mhm.
Which, by the way, why? Because once we know it, then we become so certain in it that I think that it almost becomes idolatrous. Right? The whole idea of fundamentalism is the assurance that your truth is the only truth, the correct truth. And the Sfat Emet is saying that's not what God is looking for. Right? That's not the journey. The journey of life isn't about certitude. So ratzon, will, and teshukah, desire, drive a person to keep seeking out the object of their desire. They keep alive the hunger and the passion, and they keep at bay possession. That's so beautiful, isn't it? Right? Because possession is what leads us to assuming that what we have is right and correct and absolute. So much of the world that we live in today is because people have let go of the desire of learning, of being on the journey, and have only come to the place of absolute knowledge. My truth is right. That's possession. Yediyah, knowing, is the enemy of growth. Wow.
God didn't want us, it's like from the tree of knowledge. He didn't want us to have the knowledge.
Well, he didn't want us to have the certitude
right.
of God wants life should be a constant exploration and openness to what else might I learn, as opposed to, okay, I know I'm right, therefore you're wrong, therefore you're an idiot, and if you don't believe me and follow me, then you're going to hell. Now, obviously, I'm extending that a little bit more than what the Sfat Emet is saying, but I think that's really where so much of our society has gotten to. George, and then I think I saw David's hand up.
I got three quickies on this. First of all, in the Talmud, they say Elu ve'elu, you know, this and that version. And there's supposed to be 70 ways to interpret it. But also, speaking of a bat mitzvah, one of the things they say is notain ha-Torah, giving. They don't say in the past, current. So you can never know it because it's happening.
Good, beautiful.
You know.
Thank you. Really nice, George. Really nice. David.
Yeah, I think I was, going back to the fruit, the forbidden fruit of if you eat this fruit, you will be like God, and he didn't want that. But if I'm correct, I mean, because Adam and Eve ate that fruit, that we're already living under a curse. That, if you go back to that Genesis 1 or in the Garden of Eden, that there's already, we've already strayed, we've already disobeyed from the get-go, I mean, from almost the beginning. So I think have absolute knowledge is a superiority that we shouldn't have as humans.
That's right. One that we can't have as humans, because only God could have it. You see that in the story of Job and God, where God says, you can't possibly know. The only one who knows is me, God.
But there are some people who think they know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who think they know.
Well, the reason I love Judaism is because we don't have that I know. In Christianity, in the extreme Christianity, it's like this is the way, this is the only way, and we don't have that. And I'm proud to be part of the Jewish.
Well, I'm not so sure I agree with you, because there is a fundamentalism in Judaism equally as there is in Christianity and Islam. I think there's a fundamentalism in everything, the potential for absoluteness that could exist in any belief system, which the Sfat Emet is saying is a danger. It's a danger to our own spirituality. It's a danger to our spiritual growth. And we can't achieve spiritual growth by getting to the point where we think the journey is over, because we've already achieved what we need to know. Ziggy, and then what we'll do is we'll finish the text just so you can see how she plays it out. Yeah, go ahead, Ziggy.
So when he started this paragraph, I thought where he was going with this was something that's similar that we read in Isaiah, where Isaiah says, God doesn't need your offering, God doesn't need your songs, just be true to God and follow Torah. So that's where I thought he was going with this as well, but he kind of deviated here to concentrate more on learning than following the Torah in general. So I kind of find it kind of interesting.
Yeah, this is about, exactly, because this is Abraham's journey, and Abraham's journey is supposed to reflect our own personal journey. And so this is really about how do we move to a world, how do we get to the place where knowledge is a lifelong acquisition as opposed to an achievement, a conclusion. So where was I? Yidiyah, I'm starting right here, everybody. Yidiyah, knowing, is the enemy of growth. It is an arrival that signals the end of the journey, but the spiritual journey ought never to be over. Hence, God's very first words to Abraham are Lech Lecha. Not only begin the journey, but keep on walking. So now, George, this reframes the Lech Lecha part. It's Lech and then Lech again. Go and go again. Keep going. For the Rebbe, this is both a theological statement that God cannot be known and an educational program to act as one who does not know. Similar to the concept of beginner's mind, the Sfat Emet teaches that it is only in not knowing that we come closer to knowing. It is unclear whether the castle is on fire and burning down or lit up with flickering flames, but the Sfat Emet is not interested in the castle. He's interested in the fire itself, that wild and powerful element that is ever in motion. What Abraham figuratively encountered was dynamism, unpredictability, energy, heat. It was the opposite of minucha, of rest. He had thought that the world inclined toward stasis, but God met him with movement. It was to be his first lesson in spiritual living. It is God's desire that in this world there be only longing, exertion, and no rest, only walking, lech lecha. This is the reason why God did not disclose the destination of Abraham's initial journey. It's the reason why after we hear something, we must incline our ears again and again and again. To walk a spiritual path is not to seek a final knowable destination, but to savor the slow journey into the unknown. So we'll take a couple more comments before we conclude. Jill and Jennifer, you start us off.
So I was just thinking, just like we don't know where Moses is buried because we don't want him to be idolized, or I think that's similar to this idea of the journey. Is like if we knew the place, then we might think of it as a place, but by not knowing the place, it's more of a journey, and that we always need to be on the journey.
That's nice. Don't you always, not always, but aren't there moments where you just say, I just wish I knew, or just help me make the decision for me. I just want to get there, right? That sense. And no, that's not life. Life is not about being there. Life is about getting there. It's making the decision, then having to make the decision again and reorient ourselves for every decision that we make.
And lastly, I think also with our studying of Musar, I always feel like I want to be further along than I am, but I am where I am. And as long as I'm reaching for being better, then that's where I am.
Nice, thank you. Which, by the way, there's a new Musar class beginning of November, the first or second Monday. It was out in the e-newsletter yesterday. So take a look at yesterday's e-newsletter for a new Musar class. Jennifer, Rachel, Lauren, and then we're going to have to stop.
Oh, I'm learning so much. Thank you, everyone. I can't help but look at Abraham's journey and the need to change and to reinvent along the lines of our history. How many times in the next hundreds and hundreds of years were we as a Jewish people going to have to do that? So.
For sure. Thank you. Rachel.
Thank you, Rabbi. Yeah, I think while on the one hand, what we're saying about it's nice, to always be on the journey, is one I could certainly subscribe and appreciate and find noble. I don't know if it's also the person in me who wants to feel like I'm seeing the progress of a goal and can feel like, okay, I got to where I'm trying to be, struggles with that too. If I'm like, I don't know where I'm going. And I guess it just is particularly voluminous to me right now because I feel like I'm like that in my actual life. I'm like, where am I trying to go? So that's the only thing I struggle with this notion. And maybe I misinterpreted what we're saying.
No,
but that's how I hear it.
No, I think that's a really important point that journeying lech lecha is important, but so too is minucha, rest, and being comfortable at a place. And neither is the way in which we need to live in either extreme. What we really need to do is engage in both of those. And some points in our life, there may be more leching, more journey. And in some parts of our life, there may need to be more minuchain, more resting. So I know I called on Lauren. I know there's more hands. David, don't worry. I think I'm going to take these same texts and bring it to our men's group on Monday because I find them to be fascinating. So you'll have a chance to continue this conversation with us. But I'm going to call on Lauren as the last, and then we're going to have to go. and pick up next week.
So, my spiritual journey started as an adult because I didn't have, I was a child of this, the 60s where, girls weren't given a spiritual journey. My mother said, you're a girl, you don't need to go to Hebrew school, you don't need to do anything. So it started as adult with an adult b'nai mitzvah. And then certainly Melton. Her idea was most adults stop their education at 13. And so the Melton classes have been very spiritual and open-ended and learning a lot. And then certainly your classes, Rabbi, have awakened my spiritual journey. So that's all I had to say. It's never ending.
Great.
I'm going.
Thank you.
I'll take all that spiritual energy and fly to Chicago now. So,
I just have one thing to say.
Yeah, Judy.
Go Dodgers.
Go Dodgers.
I just want to say one thing, Rabbi. What's this men's group on Monday?
Oh, Paul, I'm so sorry. It is, it's an attempt to try to get some of the younger guys,
Get you.
the
Oh, yeah.
35 to 50.
Paul,
Cuts
you're
off at 59, so all Tanakers aren't allowed.
Exactly. The goal is to try to take this group and eventually create the next men's club, with a bunch of younger guys who are not necessarily going to come to a men's club meeting. So
Get you.
Rabbi, is that open to anybody, that Monday meeting, that young adult?
35 years old to around 58, 59 years old.
But men, right?
Men,
You have to be a man.
yes.
there you go, Lauren.
Which is not to say there shouldn't be a women's group as well, but I can't do everything. I'm only one. I'm only one
That on
person.
both. We're not 59 and we're not men. Okay.
But my Rabbi, like my son who's 30 is not really the right demographic.
Because it's mostly probably not. There is a group for him that Cantor Raffi runs for 20s and 30s. And that would probably be better because of his life stage versus this group's life stage.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Remember, tonight at 7:30, Bassam Aid, the second of 3 lectures at 7:30 tonight.
Thanks for the